Onigashima! I'm Anthony!
And I'm Jimmy. We have One Piece chapter 1129, Living Dolls, and we cut back to the cover art, or I guess cover story, and we see Otama training as a ninja. Pretty cute, but Loki still waiting for something super exciting to happen.
Yeah, we get to see her becoming a bewitching kunoichi and having Shinobu, in the background or whatever. Nothing crazy is happening here. There's not much speculation to go off of. Like, Yamato is just traveling the land. So let's get into the chapter. So we get back to where we were last chapter. This is going to be a pretty linear couple of chapters, I think, for the next few chapters, just following the storyline of where they're at now. We don't really know if they're in Elbaf or not, but we did get some confirmations this chapter, kind of some context as to where we really are. So, we're being chased by this big giant. We find out who he is. Right, he's one of the.
To us, he wasn't really anything. We know he has relations to Hyrudine.
Well, he's one of the new giant pirates, right?
Yeah, he's just part of the new giant pirates. I don't know why he hates Hyrudine so much and wants to go against them. Or he's like, I know these people. They're not as good as Hyrudine says, and he's just like, fuck them. They're gonna be my dolls. I don't care.
I think it's more so. I don't know if he hates Hyrudine. I think it's more so that he's just like, why am I having to serve anybody else but giants? It's like a pride thing. Like, I think, it's similar to like how the new Fishman pirates were, or the Fishman pirates in general, where they were just like an extra extreme over the giant pirates were, I guess, nice to humans. Like, we saw them just helping Luffy, but the new giant pirates, like, who's to say that they're not just like, oh, giants are nothing, and so when Hyrudine came to them and was like, yo, we're working for Straw Hat Luffy now, they're like, hell no, dude, what are you talking about? So I don't know if he hates Hyrudine, but like, I think there's
I was thinking
dynamic.
more on the line, because I do like that. I think that could make sense too, that it's related to Fishman Island and it's maybe more of a racist thing with like racist undertones. But I was also just thinking it's like maybe that Hyrudine got the captain position even though this guy felt like he deserved it, so he's like working under him. But it's kind of like a thing with Magellan and Impel Down, where he's like, I forgot the guy's name, Hannibal. Hannibal's always like, oh, I deserve to be the warden of Impel Down, and I think this guy's like, oh, I deserve to be like the captain of the giant pirates.
Yeah, he definitely has like some kind of god complex, like we see here. He's talking
he
calls
himself the sun god.
I mean, yeah, that, and then also he's just like, you guys are my puppets, and this is just my game, and you can't hurt me at all, and like, this is just making me laugh. I love this play, or whatever, and then he gets zapped by Nami.
Yeah, honestly, bringing that up, Nami kind of goes hard in this chapter. She just sends a giant-ass lightning bolt, which I know it's coming from Zeus also, but I wonder, like, I guess Zeus just has so much power stored up, because I always thought also before, it's like Zeus and Nami help gather power from, like, the clouds surrounding them, but obviously that's not the case, because we find out that the clouds are cotton balls in this chapter.
Yeah, that's true. Everything's just fake, so we're literally, like, in a cage. Nami goes hard. Like, I think she has like a really good showing, and everybody else has like pretty good showings, and Usopp also kind of has a showing. But one point I did want to bring up about Usopp in particular, is that his thing didn't really like do anything, you know what I mean? Like, he shot the tree and it like didn't really break through. He was like, oh, I broke a mirror, but like,
which I sort of feel like is intentional by Oda, because I have a feeling, like, we've seen this from Usopp for a while now. It's like, after the time skip, he got some cool upgrades, and we're like, oh, dang, he's gonna start doing stuff. But then what we've seen mostly is a lot of his stuff is more, like, crowd control based, where he's just kind of, like, obscuring people's visions, or kind of distracting them, but not really damaging them. So I wonder if Oda's trying to highlight that here, so that we can see by the end of the arc, Usopp getting some type of upgrade.
I think so, yeah, because like, even in this chapter, like, Nami does more than Usopp, technically, you know what I mean? And she's not even supposed to be a fighter, so, like, I think that this is definitely setting Usopp up to, get some power-ups and have some character growth in this arc. But
one of the other things I think was really cool, speaking of the attacks from people, is just Luffy, and I feel like they were going to go in this direction eventually, but it's nice to see it, where he's applying Gear 4th to himself, but not his entire body.
Yeah.
So it's becoming a lot more efficient. So he can kind of just use it kind of like he was using Gear 3rd, except just putting Haki on his abilities, basically. So now he doesn't have to like have that 10-minute like blockout window where he can't use Haki when he uses Gear 4th.
I think that also kind of goes back to debunking when we first got here. A lot of people were like, oh my god, there were so many myself included, saying that there was a lot of like inconsistencies with the writing in that first Elbaf chapter, or like wherever we are here. Um, and one of those things was like Luffy said gear fourth when it looked like a gear third attack, but then clearly he does it again here. Like this seems to be very intentional. So like I think it's more so Oda just communicating like, hey, Luffy's just like casually like in base can just be gear fourth now, which is sick. You know, he's an emperor, like he should be able to do that. But I think that goes back to debunking like a lot of the crazy theories people had about this. And this chapter also just genuinely like cut a lot of those theories out.
Speaking of debunking theories, one of the things I wanted to say is like Usopp mentions it in this chapter. He's like, "Hey, look, we broke the mirror. Luffy's punching through the end," and the giant is saying like, "Oh, you're not gonna find anything over there." And even Usopp was like, "Hey, we don't know for sure if it's Elbaf on the other side of this wall. Like, we're assuming it's going to be." So like, I'm still a little bit on the train of like, "Oh, maybe we're not in Elbaf. Maybe they got captured."
They could still be on a ship.
We did see how they got captured this time. We found out why they fell asleep. They went through the sleeping gas, which is, I guess, some type of protective barrier, which makes Elbaf really hard to penetrate because they have this sleeping gas. And I wonder how they create this sleeping gas, because clearly this guy had just like extra. He had this syringe full of sleeping gas that he blasted them with. So I wonder if the Giants create this, if it's something natural that they like collect instead. Like, I'm very curious where this is coming from and how it's going to play into the rest of the arc.
You know what's weird about this sleeping mist belt too is that like we didn't really see this going to Elbaf before, right? Like Kid didn't experience that.
Yeah, that's true. A kid must have either gotten through it or gotten around it or something.
Yeah, maybe they just are taking a different route. Like I don't know what this sleeping mist belt is. Like I had almost assumed before he said that in the panel before that they were just out because of the absinthe and everybody was like drunk and shit, and then like this bird snatched them out of the sky, this giant bird, and then you know he like extra gassed them or whatever. But like apparently there's this whole thing with the land, and I don't know if like the rest of the Straw Hat crew is gonna have to go through that, or maybe like I would assume like the Giants know, right?
Because they did all fall asleep also. They woke up and were like, "Hey, where's everybody else?"
Yeah.
So I assume both ships went through the sleeping gas, but then this guy, since he knew all of these people because of Hiruden, was like, "Okay, let me just capture these guys."
Well, he didn't.
Also knowing that, it was like, "Hey, I can't actually capture the giant pirate ship because that's way too big."
Well, he didn't even intend to catch them. Like the bird just came back with it. He was like, "What do you got this time?" And he's like, "Oh my god, there it's them." So like, I think it's just he kind of like, you know, happened upon them. And he has these like, you know, and in that shot too where the bird comes back, like you said, like we don't know if this is like, Elbaf or not. Like clearly he's outside because the bird like is taking the sunny to him, but like you know you can only see the sky in that shot, so we can't really.
I wonder if this means he's like the defender of Elbaf. Maybe he's like supposed to be part of like the Department of Defense for Elbaf, where he's basically securing the borders. He has his bird there to collect anybody that might be trespassing.
Right.
And so this is just kind of a side effect of that. And then, like you said, when he notices it's them, he's like, "All right, I'm gonna fuck around with them." Which is also why he probably has so many other people, right? Because they were all trying to like invade Elbaf at some point. Or maybe not invade. Maybe they were just like passing through, and then he was like, "Okay, we're not going to let you destroy our hometown."
Well, he also calls this like a detention center, doesn't he? So I wonder if this is some kind of like he's in charge of capturing people as they come in from a certain area or something like that. You know, this could be anything. But another thing I kind of wanted to bring up was we had speculated about this guy potentially being like a holy knight, right? And obviously, like that was disproven in that chapter. Like he's a new giant pirate, but he still has the same mask as that other holy knight. I mean, now we know that the connection we made last chapter with Hiruden like having that mask on his ship is probably why he has it. Like I'm assuming like a lot of the new giant pirates kind of associate with this thing, but I wonder if that's some sort of like deity that they worship, and like, you know, like I don't know. I just want to know how that connects to the Holy Knight, because we did see that before. I just obviously he's not the one that we saw, but it'll be interesting to see like how it all connects like later down the line, and I think it's something that we need to keep our eye on.
And if it does connect to both the Holy Knights and to the giant pirates, I wonder if, like you said, maybe it's a deity, but is it like from the Void Century? Maybe this was like some type of like special being, kind of like how Nico was from the Void Century. Like, I'm also curious, like, why he wants to call himself the Sun God specifically. Like, I mean, obviously it's because Elbathians worship, like Nika himself. But like, why is he worshiping Nika but wearing this mask? is this what Nika used to look like in some sense? I don't think so, but
Nah, I
these are
mean,
just
like,
some of the questions that like come into my mind.
I think another thing that's interesting is like, we had assumed that all these guys here that are like living in this detention center looking thing are like they genuinely believe that this is the sun god. Like that's what it seemed like at first. But then after Luffy and crew start making a ruckus, some of them are like, "Hey man, I think this is our chance. Like we can get out of
We
here."
gotta get out of here.
So like, maybe they're kind of forced into this whole sun god thing just because he's a giant and they can't do anything about it, and they
Yeah,
have
I
all
feel
these
like they were
animals
just
running
kind of
around.
forced to believe. Like this guy would be like, "I'm the sun god," and then if someone was like, "No, you're not," he would just squish them.
Yeah,
So everyone's just like, "Oh, out of fear, like, yeah, he's the sun god. Like, just play into it. We'll see if we can survive some other way."
right.
And now, like you said, this is their chance, which also I think speaks to this guy's immaturity because we also saw it in this chapter where he's like, "Oh, these are my pets. Oh, I mean my creatures that I put here." Like
Yeah.
he's trying to like play it off like it's not just like one big dollhouse. And I feel like in terms of Elbaf soldiers, in terms of giants, I feel like he's really young compared to a lot of the other ones because that's the vibes I get from all of
That's
this.
probably true. Yeah, I mean they're the new giant pirates. I think Hydrunin is supposed to be like
Really, he's pretty young
pretty
overall
young
too
for a
compared to the
giant, right?
giants.
Like he's like 80 or something, but in giant years, that's like a not too old. I
I
mean, we
mean,
saw him in
we
the
know
Big
Zoro
Mom
and Brogy were
flashback.
fighting for 100 years, and they were sailing the sea way before
Yeah,
that.
they're
So
like in their
yeah,
prime, right? Like I feel like they're in their prime, and then like Hydrunin we saw in the Big Mom flashback like as a kid. So I don't think it's been like that long. The one other thing I kind of wanted to bring up before we wrap up here is that he's talking to them, and I guess this is like a translation thing, but he's talking to them and calls them like Luffy Tasso, Zoro Tasso, Nami Tasso, Usopp Tasso, whatever. And they're saying like, oh, why is he talking like a samurai? So I thought that was interesting. I don't know. I don't have any connections or whatever. Obviously, like we can draw to Wano. I don't think that there we saw any giants on Wano besides like the Onis, which doesn't really count. But it's interesting that he kind of like has that dialect, or maybe he's just like talking like that because he's a weirdo and wants this to be a kabuki play or something.
that could be it. I did think like the Tasso thing when I first heard it, even before they mentioned, it, I was like, oh, it's just like a naming thing, like they did with Taro and Wano, like they said.
Yeah.
And then they actually brought it up as a plot point. So I'm thinking like we kind of know that all the people of the Void Century that were like allied with Joy Boy, all the people that had poneglyphs were from the different like the different like races, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the Minks have one, Alabasta had one, the Fishermen had one, Wano had one because they created it. So I feel like Giants is just another piece in that puzzle where they were probably like friends or allies with Wano at some point in all of the Joy Boy crew. But maybe just over time they kept some of the same naming conventions, same
Yeah.
tendencies, but just like I don't know if it goes past that. It probably will, knowing Oda and just because he blatantly like mentioned in this chapter. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I would say also that like the Giants are a race that are so old that they kind of predate a lot of like the stuff that we see at the beginning of the story. Like, this guy could have very well been around at the time of like God Valley or like even before that, and he could still just be like a normal aged giant. You know what I mean? Like he seems young, but it's still like, if he's the same age as Rudin, Big Mom was a kid when we saw this guy as a kid. So it's like he could have totally like we don't know what Wano's history was pre like Odin and stuff really. So I wonder if there was some connection with the giants because like you're saying like those are kind of like the big islands like Elbaf, Wano, Fishman Island that have this like Joy Boy connection. So I wonder if there was ever any like crossover. I mean, clearly, we see like Kawamatsu on Wano, and he's a fishman, right? So like, I wonder if there were at any point like any giants. Like, what if this guy was in Wano at some point? Like, we just don't know. So like, I think because the giants are so old, it's just like interesting to think about like kind of how they connect to the rest of the world, and this is like one of the first instances that we're seeing of that.
yeah, like with the Giants also, like you said, since they lived so long, if you think about it, it was probably only 2 or 3 generations back where their ancestors were living in the Void Century. Because we've, I think, seen it before where giants could live up to like 300, 400 years or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
So if the Void Century was 800 years ago, then it could literally be like Dorian Brogy's like father or grandfather, which would still be alive to tell them like direct stories.
Right.
It's not like the humans and all the other races where these stories are going to be lost with time because they just don't live as long.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like I would imagine that Dorian Brogy's parents lived at the time that like Nolan did, at least. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
that was what, like 400 years ago. So yeah, I think you're very correct. Like, it'll be interesting to see how all this evolves. Obviously, like this is a lot to extrapolate from a little chapter, and we're about to bust out into either. I think it's either gonna be, they're on a ship and they're near the ocean, or maybe they're in some other location, but hopefully they're just like in Elbaf and we can like get this arc started, and like see what the real Elbaf looks like. But I don't know, we'll see. But
yeah.
best part about the chapter is that I think we will get to see, because
You say it, let them know.
no break next week. Let's go.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy that we're getting these like strings of chapters again finally, like, and this is when we need it, like when the chapters are like relatively slow, and there's not like too much going on. But there's still like a good amount to speculate with all these chapters, so I'm excited for the next one. Let's see where they end up. Maybe they'll be in real Elbaf. Maybe we'll see the carcass
Or
of
Zoda
Eustace
taking
Captain Kidd.
We go to the bottom of the ocean, Kid is just lying there, still just dead.
Dude.
But yeah, good chapter overall. I like these intro chapters. It feels like classic One Piece again, like we said. But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and you can feel free to fight us in the comments.
Yeah, fight us in the comments.
We always like a good fight.
Yeah. We haven't been seeing no fighting lately. Do you think Luffy is Emperor status? I mean, obviously he is, but like casual con gun, like pretty good. That's what like was taking out Doflamingo. So he's just throwing those around. See, tell us in the comments if you think Luffy loses against Doflamingo.
Cap. Okay.
All right, y'all.
I think we'll end it there. Peace out, guys.
Peace out.